Hi everyone. About a little over a month ago, I posted a video on my thoughts about a top 200 albums of the 90s list that was made by Digital Dream Door. I actually received a little bit of a request to create more content around this list, and I am without shame. I will continue to milk a top 200 list for sure. This is going to be a little bit meta. This is going to be a top 10 hidden gems of that top 200 albums of the 90s list. And I know it's a little bit awkward calling something a hidden gem when it lands on a top 200 list of the decade. But at this point, I think there's some artists, some bands, some albums that have been a little bit lost to time. And if not that, a little bit less appreciated at this point in hindsight than I think they should have been. But first, some honorable mentions. First honorable mention is Live Through This by Hole. Whether you're a Courtney Love fan or a conspiracy theorist, she killed on this album. For obvious reasons, Hole's always going to be in the shadow of Nirvana as a band, but I think this album specifically is a lot closer in quality to the Nirvana albums than a lot of people would like to admit. I would probably have put this in the proper top 10 and not in the honorable mentions, but I think Courtney Love is fairly still well known, even at this point. Again, a lot for the wrong reasons. Second honorable mention is Things Fall Apart by The Roots. Again, this is another album that probably should be in the top 10 proper, but they're still a little bit in the spotlight, and I'm not sure if The Roots are considered a hidden gem band. But right now, I think they're mostly known for being Jimmy Kimmel's house band, which I don't want to say it's sad to see, but it's a little below their talent level. The third and final honorable mention is Supa Dupa Fly by Missy Elliott. This is her album before all of her smash hits. And even from the start, she always sounded simultaneously one step ahead of the curve, as well as paying a little bit of homage to more of her old school hip hop roots. It's a fantastic album, and if you missed this one, you should definitely check it out. Into the actual top 10 list. At number 10, I have Baduizm by Erykah Badu. And this one comes with a little bit of a jazzy flavor. If you're not into that, you might not like this album as much. But honestly, I personally love her voice, and if you're into hip-hop acts from the 90s, like A Tribe Called Quest and the Fugees, I think this one will probably resonate with you if you haven't had a chance to check it out. Number 9 is Violator by Depeche Mode, which is an awkward album for two big reasons. The first, obviously the title. Second, this album has exactly 9 songs on it, and I'm going to die on this hill. 9 is the most awkward amount of songs on an album possible. I'll be taking no more notes on this issue. All that aside, at this point in their career in 1990, arguably the most 80s sounding year of the 1990s, they seem to have really leaned into themselves more of a gimmick than their normal morose self, and it seems to give this album a bit more of a fun edge that I don't think was previous in other records they've made. Number 8 is Pills, Thrills, and Bellyaches by the Happy Mondays. Before I looked at this list, I had no idea this album existed or who the Happy Mondays were, but as I read up a little bit on them, I noticed that the lead singer's name was Shawn Ryder, and that was a bit familiar to me. It's actually the same guy that did the song Dare with Gorillaz about 20 years ago. If that was your vibe, and his personality does come through quite a bit in that song, you might want to check this out. It's a little bit of a trip. They're kind of like an edgier cake. Number 7 is Dry by PJ Harvey. And I think I didn't really know PJ Harvey the way I was supposed to before listening to this album. I associate her a lot more with, I guess, like darker toned blues music mostly. But this one's a lot closer to just an alt rock record or an indie. Like, I don't want to say grunge, but kind of closer to that sort of sound. It's the album with that dress song on it. It's actually pretty good just as an album as a whole. It's one to check out if you're into more of the, I guess, the grungier alternative rock scene of the 90s. Number 6 is Laughing Stock by Talk Talk. And when I was going through this top 200 list, there was a genre that bubbled out of it that I don't think I really ever associated with the 90s specifically, which is this sort of atmospheric or ethereal prog rock. And a lot of the times it came across like a pretentious mess, in all honesty. But this was the album that was the best version of that genre from what I could tell or how I felt about it specifically. And This is the sort of album that Pitchfork would really like. If you catch that reference, proceed with caution. But if you're going to give this album a try, if it's not your usual type of music, you'll probably at least appreciate it for the fact that it's a little bit different. But otherwise, set your expectations about right, where it's either going to be probably a home run or a complete miss for you. Number 5 is Original Gangster by Ice-T. And I swear to God, if you don't already know this, he actually did have a very influential music career before he was the Law & Order SVU guy. To the point, I think Korn as a band actually gets quite a bit more credit than they should for a lot of the ideas that Ice-T was either pioneering or popularizing. Ice-T comes obviously more from the hip-hop background and crossed over to rock, where Korn was quite a bit more on the rock side, crossing over to hip-hop. But it lands at about the same spot. And if you listen to this one, if you're a fan of Korn albums like Follow the Leader, you should give Ice-T's Original Gangster a spin, because I think you'll hear a lot of the roots of where Korn's sound came from. Number 4 is Self-Titled by Garbage, and this album is very good, but it's also very interesting to me for a very specific reason. If you go back to early 90s music, you hear a lot of stripped down rock, a lot of grunge influences, obviously. But as you move through the decade, you start to hear electronic elements slowly move their way into the music. And the self-titled album by Garbage is almost a perfect bridge between those two worlds. If you want to hear exactly what I'm talking about, if you listen to, say, The Bends by Radiohead and then OK Computer, that's probably one of the better snapshots of this side-by-side evolution in 90s alternative music. But Garbage seems to hit the perfect middle ground between the two. And in a lot of ways, even though they were tapping into the early 90s roots, they seem to be a couple steps ahead of the curve. Number 3 is 3 years, 5 months, and 2 days in the life of Arrested Development. And if you haven't heard this group or this album before, just go listen to it now. It's actually one of the most fun albums I've ever listened to in my life. I'm sure at some point I probably heard it before I went through this list, but it didn't really stand out to me, I guess, when I did. But on the re-listen, going back and listening to it now, it was absolutely amazing. Number 2 is Predator by Ice Cube, and I probably could have picked either of the other two main releases from the early 90s by Ice Cube, America's Most Wanted or Death Certificate, but I think Predator is probably a little bit lesser known than those other two releases. But in any case, in the year 2026, at this stage of my life, going back and listening to Ice Cube is absolutely incredible. I know some people have a barrier with some hip-hop from the late 80s and early 90s where the sound quality of the beats aren't quite what people want to hear, and also there's some trouble sometimes about connecting to the lyrics of that era of hip-hop. But I can confidently say Ice Cube has neither of these problems. Quite a few of his raps sound very personally directed to me as a listener about how much he wants to kill me, and I could not be having a better time. Last but not least, or actually the most by process, this is the number 1 hidden gem of a top 200 list of top albums of the 90s made by Digital Dream Door. But that album is The Holy Bible by Manic Street Preachers. And this band is a fascinating one to me. When you had the Britpop explosion in mostly the mid-90s, it was dominated by bands like Blur and Oasis, both of which I'm a huge fan of, especially Blur. But there was a good window of time when Manic Street Preachers was seen to be the best band of that movement and of the decade, really. You could find top 10 lists from maybe like 1998 that would list Manic Street Preachers as the 4th or 5th band of all time, which sounds a bit crazy at this point, but I think they have a better argument for it than a lot of people remember. It really was an incredible band, and they're still releasing music to this day. If for some reason you missed out on Manic Street Preachers' first time around, or this is the first time you're hearing about them, and you enjoy bands like Blur and Oasis, and other bands like Stone Roses, which I think also don't get the proper recognition at this point, you should really check out Manic Street Preachers. It's an incredible band, specifically The Holy Bible. also if you're into more of the heavier side of Britpop. But all of their albums are incredible, and I encourage you to take a shot at any one of them. That's the end of this list. I can't and certainly won't promise to not keep milking this top 200 albums of the 90s list. If there is even a slight or the slightest of compliment or even acknowledgement of the existence of this content, I'm going to continue making content and videos around that list.